Hello, everybody. Welcome back to God Questions. My name is Pat McDonald, and I'm the pastor here at Word of Life and your host for God Questions. We are on video number 5. And again, if you are new to this, if this is your first class, please, I want to encourage you, invite you to go back to class 1, where we spend about 10 minutes kind of describing and explaining the purpose and the goal of the class. But just in short, we recognize, of course, everybody asks God questions. That's generally what prayer is all about, is we're asking God, why not this, and why do that, and why did he do this, and why didn't he do that? But are we aware that God asks us questions? And of course, he's asking them not to be informed, because he already knows everything. He's asking us to stimulate us beyond just a single dimension of information. He's trying to stimulate our minds, to break our minds and our thoughts out of a box, and to really dive deeper into the things he wants to do in us and through us. So, we're going to dive into the class tonight. Before I go into tonight's class, I just have to say that I hope this class is working for you guys like it's working for me. Last week's class on the question to Ezekiel, can these bones live? And studying that, I just got to tell you that it really stirred something in my heart, because I begin to recognize that I have some do not trespass signs on certain areas of my life. And, I love the Lord. I love his word. I love the prophetic. I love supernatural. I love to pray for people and see them get healed and get delivered. But sometimes it's easier to pray for somebody else to get healed than to believe that God can heal me. And when we were talking about the valley of dry bones, it's really easy for me to say, yeah, Ezekiel, yeah, prophesy to those bones. They can live. But I began to realize that valley of dry bones really represented a very dark time in his past. And for him to get to the bones and keep his eyes open and be attentive, much less to really, in faith, proclaim the promises of God to his valley of dry bones, it got me doing some serious inventory in my life. So I just had to really take some time and really think that through. So that's what's happening to me. I hope it's working as well for you guys. Tonight's class stirred me as well, and hopefully it'll do the same for you. Tonight's question, there's actually a series of questions in this particular chapter. I'm actually leaping into the New Testament. As I mentioned in the first class, that I don't intend to go chronologically. I don't intend to stay in the Old Testament. There are hundreds and hundreds of questions from God to us. In the New Testament, there are well over 120 questions by Jesus alone. This class ain't going to go that long. But I'm going to dive into John chapter 21 and the questions found in verse 15, 16, and 17. The question was, Simon Peter Bar Jonah, in other words, son of John, do you love me more than these? Do you love me more than these? Verse 16 is similar, and 17 would seem almost identical, but you're going to see at the end of the class that they aren't exactly identical. And it was just simply, Peter, son of John, do you love me? And he said it again in verse 17. Let's get a little background to this group of scriptures and put some context to it. Chapter 21, of course, this is after Jesus has been crucified, after he's been buried, and after he was raised from the dead. And in this chapter, it specifically says this is the third time that Jesus revealed himself to his disciples after his resurrection. In this particular situation, Peter and this group of disciples, it's Peter and it's Thomas, it's Nathaniel, John and James, the sons of Zebedee, and then it says other disciples. They are now in Galilee during this chapter. in the region of Galilee, and Peter says, I'm going fishing. I think we can rest assured that it wasn't just pulling out his fishing pole and his fly rod and he's heading for the stream. No, these were professional fishermen. They got in their boat. They fished with nets, and they fished typically at night. And in this particular case, that's exactly what happened. They fished all night and caught nothing. At dawn, as the sun was starting to rise, a man from shore, which is about 100 yards away from where they were fishing, a man from shore shouts out to them, "Hey friends, have you caught anything?" And they answer back, "No, we have not caught anything all night." And the man from shore says, "Toss your nets to the right side and you'll get some." So they tossed their nets to the right side, and sure enough, the net was so full of fish they couldn't even haul it in. And then it says that John the Apostle turns to Peter and says, "Peter, it's the Lord." And so Peter, he jumps into the water, swims the 100 yards to shore, while he left the guys to the boat to haul in the fish and haul the boat to shore. But they get to shore, and it's indeed Jesus. And Jesus is there fixing breakfast. He's literally on a charcoal fire, grilling some fish, and he's got bread, and he feeds these guys breakfast. And there's no mention in the narrative that there is any discussion at breakfast. But after breakfast, Jesus starts the questions. And it's posed predominantly, exclusively to Peter. But of course, I think we all understand that any time in these scriptures where a question is to an individual, we know it's to them, but it's really through them to us as well. And he says to Peter, he says, verse 15, John 21:15, "Peter, Bar Jonah, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Do you love me more than these? My first question came to mind was, what did Jesus mean by these? What or who was he referring to? Do you love me more than these? What was he referring to? I started doing some study, found some interesting variations of opinion. One of them said that what Jesus was referring to was the fish and the fishing and the livelihood or the fruit of their livelihood. Do you love me more than food, than the fish here? Interesting perspective. Another translations thought it was, did Peter love Jesus more than Peter loved the other disciples? Jesus saying, do you love me more than you love them? Okay. Another one was, do you love me more than they love me? Frankly, any one of these interpretations could be true. Certainly thought-provoking. Certainly provoking to me. Do I love Jesus more than the stuff that he's provided for me, or that I have achieved on my own based upon the gifts he's given me? Do I love Jesus more than my job, more than my career, more than my house, more than... Do I love Jesus more than these? How about this? Could Jesus have purposely asked the question vaguely in order to ask all three of those questions at once? Do you love me more than the stuff? Do you love me more than the other people? Or do you really think you love me more than they love me? What do you think? What do you think? I want you to ponder this question. I also pose this question to all of us. Do we love Jesus more than these? Whatever the these is. I want you to discuss that today. Many of you, going on to another series of questions on this, many of you are already aware of an interesting word usage by Jesus and Peter in this narrative, in this dialogue between Jesus and Peter. Because when Jesus asked Peter if he loved him in verse 15 and 16, the word love there was the word agape. So Jesus said, do you agape love me more than these? And the second one was, do you agape love me? And what's interesting is Peter's response. Jesus asked him, do you agape love me? And Peter's response was, yes, Lord, I phileo love you. Now, most of you know that agape is that supreme love, the not just driven by emotions love, the willing to lay down your life, the sacrificial love, the love that God so loved the world that he gave, right? That's the agape love. Phileo is the human love, the emotional love, the affectionate love, the best friend love, Philadelphia, love of brother, city of brotherly love. So Jesus asks Peter, do you agape love me? And Peter says, yes, Lord, I phileo love you. And then Jesus asked it again, do you agape love me? And Peter says, yes, Lord, I phileo love you. And finally, Jesus says it, do you phileo love me? And Peter says, Lord, you know I phileo love you. So I pose this question to us. Do we agape love Jesus? Or do we phileo love Jesus? Or do we both? Is he the one we lay our life down for, but he's not really our friend? Or is Jesus just your friend and your buddy, but you're not really prepared to lay your life down for him and his cause and his truth? I want you to discuss that. And finally, I want you to consider the responses. Peter says, yes, Lord, I phileo love you. And to the first one, Jesus says, okay, then feed my lambs. Everybody knows feeding lambs is different than feeding anything else. Feeding children is different than feeding a teenager or feeding an adult, right? Do you agape love me? Yes, Lord, I phileo love you. Then I want you to feed my lambs. And then Jesus said, okay, do you agape love me? And he says, I phileo love you a second time. He's all right, then I want you to tend or pastor or shepherd my sheep. And the final one, which was, do you phileo love me? And he says, I do phileo love you. And he says, I want you to feed my sheep. So I pose this question to you. If this is a if-then question and answer thing, like if you love me, you'll do the following. I've already asked you, do you agape love Jesus? Do you phileo love Jesus? If so, if we do love him, are we prepared to feed his lambs, shepherd his sheep, and feed his sheep? That's what he says. If you love me, you'll do these things. Or can we just love him on our own and just privately and don't ask me to do anything. Don't ask me to help anybody. Don't ask me to care for other people. Now, I know I'm speaking to some pretty serious Christians here. I know you guys are almost, every one of you are great servants and great ministries and shepherds in all the right ways. But if you're like me, this is challenging my heart. So I leave you those questions, and I want you to discuss that. Do you love me more than these? Hope you enjoy that. Hope you can dive into that with some and get involved with the meat of that matter. And I look forward to hearing the response. And we will see you next week with another one of God's questions. God bless everybody.